Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Con. We're continuing the top 100 games of all time with 80 through 71 today. I've already done 2 videos in this series. You can check those out. They're going to be part of a playlist down below, and we're going to be continuing this top 100 games of all time through Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Before we dive into the top 80, before we dive into like 80 through 71 in this video, just a reminder, I did do a video about supporting the channel, along with the giveaway of Oathsworn, of Zombicide Undead or Alive, and of Master of the Universe. All 3 all-ins are going to be in a giveaway video. That is going to be running throughout this entire top 100. I'll link to that down below as well. But with that, oh, and then lastly, if you want the various caveats and notes and all those things of how this top 100 list is formatted, rules, restrictions, all those things, that's going to be in the first 3 minutes of the very first video in the series to avoid me repeating it every single video. And with that, let's start the list off. Starting off with number 80. Number 80 is going to be Rolling Heights from AEG. Rolling Heights, to me, is the best version of this genre of game. And when I say this genre, I specifically mean Cubitos and Quacks of Quellenberg, going to be the other 2 games, then Rolling Heights as well. There are some others, I believe, but those are going to be the big 3 in this series. And while I like and own all 3 of those games, Rolling Heights, to me, is the best one in that series, which I guess tells you that the other 2 aren't in my top 100. Then again, I don't know if it's that much of a surprise. I don't talk about them all that often. I do play them from time to time, but Rolling Heights, I'd say, well, Quacks of Quellenberg I play more for my family, and Cubitos doesn't hit the table as often as I'd like, but I do enjoy that one enough that it's not going anywhere, at least not quite yet. But Rolling Heights, to me, is the best of them. Which is weird, though, because it has the least powers and abilities, which is usually the thing I like the most in board games. I love powers and abilities, and Rolling Heights is the most vanilla of them. But in Rolling Heights, you're effectively building out your city. You're going to have different sections of the board, and then you're going to be rolling meeples. Hence the whole rolling part, you're literally rolling meeples into a little box, which is where it's different than Quacks of Quellenberg, where you're drawing things in the bag, Cubitos, where you're rolling dice, but in Rolling Heights, you roll meeples, and you're pushing your luck. You're gathering more meeples, add them to your supply, but whenever you bust, you no longer are able to keep rolling. Busting is defined as all your meeples being flat on the ground, as opposed to standing on their head in any configuration or another, where they are working hard if they're standing up properly, or whether they're working partially, whether they're standing up, you know, on their head, their arms, the legs, whatever it is. The game is incredibly appealing, though, as far as rolling meeples into a box. That's a mechanic I want to see done elsewhere, because it's surprisingly fun. You wouldn't think it's the best version of either rolling a standard 6-sided die, or drawing things from a bag, both of which have, like, mental ratios that we're familiar with, but in Rolling Heights is kind of a sense of, I don't know the ratios, I don't know the math, never tell me the math, never tell me the odds. It has that sense of charm to the game experience. Along with that, there's a good sense of tableau building as you work towards gathering more meeples, rolling more meeples, and building out the best possible city. And it has a table presence aspect where as the players work together to build out that city, you're going to see the city progressively continue to grow higher and higher, and just, you know, be the result of the players' choices and decisions in the game as you work towards an incredibly rewarding city to build. And then if you have that little like King Kong meeple at the end, you can also destroy the city. Rolling Heights is surprisingly addictive. It's one of those games that I'm constantly surprised I like as much as I do, but I do like it as much as I do. My number 79 is a slightly controversial pick for me. Not necessarily for you. For you, it's like, hey, it's one of his top 100, what's the big deal? But my number 79 is going to be Ruination, and I reserve the right for this to not be here next year. And I'm going to give context and caveats and as much opinions as I possibly can around this game, because this is a game that once upon a time left my collection. Right now, though, I currently have it back with the upcoming expansion. There's an upcoming expansion to the game. It's going to be launching a crowdfunding at some point, and I've been playing it with the expansion and diving into it again. This game again, I played the game a long time ago. Ruination is from Colossal Games, designed by Travis Chance, and it's a game that is effectively a direct in-your-face area control experience. It's area control, but with powers and abilities and taking actions and just run, fight, hit, spawn more units, hit. There's 3 core action cards, and every time you draw an action card, you're either spawning new units, moving your units, which involves fighting, or gathering resources. Those are the 3 things you're doing. But the action cards are variable, and every action card has a modifier. So this turn, if I run, I might be able to move 2 zones instead of 1. This turn, if I run, I may walk into combats with more aggression, more attack. Every single time you draw an action card, the next action card is revealed, so every one of the actions is always unique as you play through it. Meanwhile, there's additional mercenaries you can hire into your band. They're not called mercenaries, there's another name for them, nomads or something like that. There's additional cards you can add to your tableau to power yourself up, and then you're going to engage in fast combats where everyone's going to die, you'll spawn more units, you'll repeat the process as you move up various tracks trying to win in the game. I played this a long time ago, reviewed the game, thought it was okay, there were things I liked about it, there were things I didn't like about it, but ultimately it didn't compete with other area control games in my genre. When I'm looking at my favorite area control games, my Inish, Cyclades, Kemet, Blood Rage, all those things, it just didn't compete with those games. Those of you paying attention may notice that currently it's higher than Kemet. Currently. We'll see about the other ones. Who knows where those are. Maybe they're not in my top 100 at all. Maybe they're going to be in the upcoming videos. But Ruination, diving into this one again, and I will say I've played this one twice so far since diving back into it, which is why I'm saying I reserve the right to change my mind. I reserve the right to sit there and say, a year from now, who knows? But right now, I like Ruination enough that it should be higher than 79 right now. But I lowered it a bit to account for the newness factor, the fact that it's right back, I'm trying it again, but I like it so much more than I did the first time round. And I think some of that is the expansion. The expansion adds new things. It adds these cards that are unique to each faction. Those are fun to play with. It adds new decks for some of the mercenaries, so you have more things going on there. It adds more cards and events that go into the core action decks. There's a bunch of small things. There's chieftains for the clans. Everything the expansion does is good. Everything is good. Nothing about the expansion is bad. It's all good stuff that enhance the game experience. And yet, just from playing it, I think I'd still like the game experience more, even just the base game, more than I did the first time around. And so, I don't know, opinions change, tastes change, sometimes it's the group of people, sometimes it's the day of the week, other times it's the things going on in your life. All I know is I like Ruination more now than I did in the past, and I don't know if that's exclusively because of the expansion. I think that some of that's just my own opinions and tastes changing over the years, which has me hesitant and worried that next year you're going to be like, Ruination, it's 172, it's dropped a lot since then. So we'll see how Ruination fares, but for right now, it's my number 79 game of all time. My number 78 is a giant box, which is why I only have the box lid, and that's going to be Foundations of Rome. Foundations of Rome is going to be our number 78 pick over here. This is a delightful game from Arcane Wonders, a box that is way too large. Fun fact, though, for those of you who want Foundations of Rome, they are coming out with a more accessible, I can't remember the name of it, but it's more modern-day Metropolis or whatever it is. I don't know, Foundations of Metropolis, Metropolis of Rome, something Metropolis. I don't know what it's called. I don't remember. They're coming out with a more just tile-laden game as opposed to the giant miniatures you get in Foundations of Rome. I think it's a good game regardless. To be very clear, I think Foundations of Rome is a good game regardless of the table presence, regardless of the miniatures, regardless of all the bling that make it better. But I do think the bling makes it better. I do think having gigantic miniatures you're placing on the table, watching Rome build up in front of you, having delightful metal coins, which by the way, I don't actually use the Foundations of Rome metal coins, I don't like those at all. I use ones from Top Shelf Gamer. You can check out any of my Deluxification videos, or the most recent one I've done on the channel. I showed the coins I use for Foundations of Rome. Phenomenal coins. They are expensive though, then again, so is this. But either way, I do think that the table presence of Foundations of Rome elevates the gameplay experience. I do think art, graphic design, components, those things I think add to something that is already good. You can't, what's the expression? You can't polish a turd. There's an expression like that. But ultimately, a bad game is still a bad game regardless of what you put onto it. Versus a good game, I do believe, is enhanced by all of those things. From art, to miniatures, to graphic design, to any of those surrounding things, to music, to ambiance. I think games can be better with a good soundtrack behind them. I do think those things all elevate the gaming experience. My point is, Foundations of Rome, I think, is a great game. I do think it's better because of the components. For me, Foundations is tight. It's a polyomino game. It's a polyomino game with a few core actions. You're either buying plots of land, building buildings, or taking income. That's all you're doing for the most part. There's modules and expansions and things you can do, but for the most part, that's what you're doing in this game. But all of those things are so tight and so tense as far as how you're trying to acquire land, when you're building over other buildings, how you're modulating and changing the landscape around you, because everyone builds based on the things around them. I build a building knowing it'll score points because it's next to a civic building. You go ahead and you take away your civic building and replace it with another building. There's a constant change and adaptation to the landscape, but with limitations that make it strategic and not chaotic. I think Foundations of Rome is delightful. I think the modules and variations add to the experience. I think the table presence does add to the experience. That's going to be my number 78 game of all time. My number 77 game of all time isn't here. It's not here. It's the only game on this list. It's the only game of my top 100 that I don't physically have in my collection at the moment. And the reason for that is because I had to send it on, unfortunately. That's going to be Last Light from Grey Fox Games from Roy Canada. Last Light is delightful. The reason it's not here, by the way, is because I played the prototype back in the day. Then I got the final game. I got a pre-production copy, not pre-production, I got one of the first production copies to be able to cover, to review, to do gameplays of. And they're trying to circle it around for coverage. So they asked, hey, can you send your copy on? We'll get you another one. And I was like, absolutely I can. And I'm still waiting for my other one, which is a shame because I like that game and I would totally 100% play it, so I'm a little waiting for that one. Anyways, Last Light's not here, unfortunately. I can't show you the box, I can't talk about it. Maybe I'll throw up a thing on screen if I remember. I don't, no guarantees. I'll try though. But Last Light is effectively a 4X game that plays in an hour, and it is such a good time. this is one of those games where it's actually a fairly controversial game, I'd say, to a large degree, both because of the actual appearance of the game, which, frankly, the appearance of the game is not as much to my taste. I think it looks fine, but I'm not blown away by the planets and the look and all that. But the gameplay is what pulls me in on this one. I think Last Light genuinely gives you a 4X experience in an hour. I have played many 4X light experiences, and they all don't feel like a proper 4X, or they come with enough compromises that make me think, you know what, just play Twilight Imperium, call it a day. I've never actually played Twilight Imperium, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but hypothetically, just play a larger 4X game and call it a day. Eclipse, Second Dawn for the Galaxy, whatever it is. But I played a bunch of these shorter 4X experiences, and they either don't feel like 4X, or they feel like they're just not good enough, or something about them doesn't deliver, is what I'd say. They don't deliver for what I'm looking for when someone sells me on, hey, you want 4X, but not in 3 hours, not in 8 hours, here you go. They have not delivered for me until Last Light has. And Last Light has. Last Light genuinely plays in an hour. You can play it on TTS in under an hour, or an hour-ish. You can teach the game and play it in roughly an hour. I have filmed gameplays on the channel that take an hour or less to play the game. I played it at 2-player and enjoyed it. Not my favorite player count. I played it at 3, 4, and 5 and think it's excellent. I've also played it at 7, and I don't think that one's as good. I think higher player counts is less my jam with that one personally. They do have an expansion that lets you play from 5 to 8 players as opposed to the base game, which is, 2 to 4. And while I think it's a fine experience, I would not personally be pulling it out at those player counts. For me, I'd say I am glad I have the 5-player expansion. I'm glad I have the 5 to 8, primarily because at 5 I would still play it. At 6 I'd consider it. At 7 and 8 I think it's just too chaotic and not for me. But the core idea of the game is you play cards simultaneously, you take actions simultaneously, except for combat, which does have to be resolved in turn order. That's where things tend to get a bit chaotic, especially at higher player counts. I think the rest of the game works just fine at 8 players. Combat specifically just becomes a wild card at 8 players, and combat is still an intrinsic part of the 4X experience, including in Last Light. That Exterminate. They take that Exterminate seriously as you expand slowly across the galaxy, as the planets rotate, as you collect light, as you build up more and more upgrades, as you have your unique alien race. There are so many things about Last Light that are just a good time, but the biggest and most important thing is it gives me a tight, meaty, great experience in an hour for 3, 4, 5, or plus more players as well. So Last Light, my number 77. My number 76 is the second party game we have on this list, unless you count 8-player Last Light as a party game, which personally I don't. That's going to be Decrypto. Decrypto is the second but not the last party game you're going to see on my top 100 games of all time, and Decrypto is such a good experience. In fact, if you look at most of my party games on this list, I think there's going to be a few. We're going to have like maybe 4 or 5 party games on this top 100. One of them is just purely about the chaos, the fun, and all that. The others are all about that analytical process when you combine a party experience but with a degree of deduction and trying to feel clever. So it gives you the fun vibes of, look, we're having a party game, but it also has the deductive vibes of still feeling strategic as you play. We had So Clover already that had that. We have Decrypto that we're going to talk about, and we'll have more as we go through this list. But Decrypto basically has players having their own individual clues over here. The team has their clues, so each team has their own clues. And so I know my clues are Black, Dragonfly, Cocktail, and Sombrero. But then I get the card 3, 4, 2, so I have to try to go ahead and connect 3, 4, and 2 in that order. But I have to do so in a way that is not immediately obvious, because otherwise the opposing team will figure it out. So maybe I go with Drink, Insect, and Hat. Okay, maybe I go with that. Drink, Insect, Hat. The other team has no context for what these clues are, so they don't know what's going on, so they can't figure things out, and my team guesses 3, 4, 2, and they get it right. The problem is, the next time I get a card, let's say the next card is 1, 4, 2. Okay, 1, 4, 2. Slight difference. It's not 3, 4, 2. In fact, let's change it even further. It's 1, 2, 4. The next card I get is 1, 2, 4. I have to give my team clues for that. So now I'm trying to do Black. I'm trying to do Dragonfly and Sombrero. The problem is I said Insect and Hat. So I have to be mindful that if I said something like, if I say color, bug, and then, I don't know, Mexican or something like that, color, bug, Mexican, at that point, people may or may not be able to guess what Mexican is and color because they have no context with color, and Mexican and hat don't inherently go together, but they certainly will be able to figure out that if I said insect and bug, that probably means dragonfly. So maybe I don't say bug. Maybe I say fire, because the dragon in fly, the dragonfly, if I just say fire, they'd have to connect fire and insect, which is not as immediately intuitive. You're trying to collect these sets of things that all lead to the same point, but the other team has the ability to intercept, and that ability to intercept is what makes this game great. It's what makes this game interesting to try to think through how you're going to construct and put your clues together. And so Decrypto, an absolutely good time, a great party experience that lets you feel strategic as you play. That's going to be my number 76 game of all time. My number 75 is new to me. In fact, I'm realizing I probably should have been telling you as I go, but some of these games that we've talked about are new to me on this list. I'll have to go at the end of the top 100 when we're finally done. I'll do a full top 100 analytics and breakdown and all of that, where I go through how how the top 100 is overall and where things weigh up year to year. We'll do that later, not right now. I'll tell you how many games are new to the list, how many games left, what the changes are, the biggest change. I'll go through all that stuff in a separate video at the very end of the top 100. But for right now, we're on to number 75, which is new to me this year. That's going to be Trailblazers from Bitewing Games. This is so much fun. It's such an easy game to play multiplayer and such an easy game to play solo. And usually, I would say more often than not, games, meaning this is a competitive multiplayer experience and a solo experience too. It is rare for those games to work well for me. Usually, a game that works as well for me solo as it does multiplayer is usually a cooperative experience. But if you have competitive games, I usually either prefer the solo or prefer the multiplayer, and in this case, I don't know which one I prefer. I think other games in the genre that do a good job with that are Calico, Cascadia. There are other games, Keystone, North America. There are other games that do such a great job with that as well, but Trailblazers is such a good game. Designed by Ryan Courtney, put out by Bitewing Games. This is a game of building trails. Let's see if I can show you stuff in the box over here. So over here, you're going to have this trail over here, and you're putting out cards. You're drafting cards and placing them into your trails, trying to create loops of, the brown camp needs brown pathways to loop back to the trail. You'll score a point for each of those, but you also have scoring goals in the game. And so across 4 rounds of play, across 6 cards per round, 24 cards total, placing those cards into your tableau, you're trying to score and create the best trail possible. That's the multiplayer game. It's fun, it's fast, and plays in 15 minutes. It's a rewarding, good, enjoyable experience. I like it a lot. Then there's the solo modes. The solo modes give you a challenge. You have to get 50 points, but you also have to achieve certain goals along the way. And that completely changes up the experience. I lose this game solo far, far, far more often than I win it, which keeps me interested. I have that point scoring goal, sure, but I also have the challenge of how am I going to make progress on this? How am I going to accomplish all these things? And it gives you a fun little puzzle to work your way through. And that's just one of the ways to play the game. There's also an expansion in the box. The bikers, hikers, whatever they are, the people moving along pathways effectively. That changes the entire way you play the game, both solo and multiplayer. And then there's the epic long solo experience, which honestly I played through once and I didn't think it was necessarily for me. I think there's merits to it, but I'd rather play the other solo modes of the game than the epic long solo mode. Variety of reasons. You can check out my full review for that. But this is going to be Trailblazers, my number 75 game of all time. My number 74 is another new to me game, and that's specifically, in fact, number 74 and 73 are also all new to me. So we got 3 new to me games in a row right now, all hitting the same kind of niche as far as where they fall weight-wise and weight class and all that. But either way, number 74 is going to be Run. Run to me from Fowers Games is delightful. This game gives me strong mind management vibes. Mind management, which was like my number 12 of all time last year. It was high. I don't remember exactly, but it was high last year. We'll see where it is this year. But Run for me gives me the same gaming experience in a smaller box for a 2-player experience and an easier way to table. It's not as satisfying as Mind Management. When you have a good game of Mind Management with 3-4 players at the table, really vibing as far as how they operate, talk, connect, and all that stuff, it is a great time. And I don't think Run hits those highs, but it's easier to play, it's faster to play, it's accessible as anything, it plays with 2 players, it has its own space over here, own reason to exist, but effectively you have 2 players, the runner and the dispatch. And the runner is trying to get various pieces of gear and then go back to the safe house, and the dispatch is moving the helicopter around the city trying to track down the runner. The game operates with such a tight degree of how you can move and what you can do, and there's so much restriction around how the runner can actually stay hidden that it gives the dispatch just enough tools at the disposal to actually go ahead and intercept and get in the way and stop the runner from operating. And so it is a tight, fun experience. It's not a perfect game. I have 1 or 2 complaints about it, which is why it's where it is, which is, number 74 of all time as opposed to number 12. But I think Run is an excellent game from Fowers Games. And if you like hidden role games at all, not hidden role games, if you like hidden movement games at all, I think this is an excellent one worth adding to your collection, and very reasonably priced while we're at it. Speaking of reasonably priced games, we have a number 73, which is going to be General Orders World War II. Another new to me game. This is another 2-player head-to-head game. By the way, there's going to be a decent amount of 2-player head-to-head games in my top 100. I found that the genre really allows for some... I should probably talk about that. When I do my top 100 analysis video, remind me, if I don't remember, to go ahead and talk about how many 2-player games made their way into that. How many solo games, how many 2-player games. Those are interesting stats to note. But either way, General Orders over here, a delightful worker placement game with a theme that I don't care for. I've already said this in other videos, but Osprey Games, if you could please go ahead and put out another theme of this game in space, medieval, whatever it is. I have nothing against World War II, it just doesn't draw me in. I'm like, whatever, it's World War II. We got people who, modern military stuff, yay. It doesn't excite me the same way, throw someone on there with a sword, a bow and arrow, some casting spells. It just works for me more. Recently, Osprey Games actually just did a new version of their Undaunted series, but in space. And I have never been more interested in Undaunted until I saw that, so, weird choices and things we talk about or care about, but General Orders is a worker placement game that is effectively a area control worker placement game. You place a worker and you move some units around. You place a worker and you drop some parachutes in. You place a worker and you bombard your opponent. There are all these things you do as far as recruiting, getting cards, all this stuff, but it's such a tight, tense, delicious experience. It is so good. It's such a satisfying surprise to me. In 2023, I played this game completely expecting this to leave my collection. I had no doubt whatsoever. This is not a game for me. I thought it would be good, to be very clear. And the names in the box, David Thompson, Trevor Benjamin, I assume those are names that are going to produce a good game. They historically have done so in the past. But just because a game is good doesn't mean it sticks around. I thought it'd be a good game. I review it, I play it, the order is important. I play it, I review it, and then it moves on from my collection, as most games I review do. I cover 300 plus new games a year. I play 300 plus new games a year, and that means that not everything can stick around. As much as I want to love everything, I have to make hard choices on a regular basis as to which things do I actually love, or versus which things caught my attention and were interesting. It's the nature of being a content creator, a board game reviewer, and I expect this to leave. And it's so ridiculously good. It is so satisfying. It's so enjoyable. I think General Orders World War II is another delightful two-player experience that will be sticking around for quite some time, unless they come up with a new version, in which case I might just get rid of this one and keep the new theme. That's entirely possible, honestly. Anyways, my number 72. My number 72 is one of the oldest games in my collection. In fact, I have to look at my top 100, but I think from the 29 games, including this one, from the 29 games we've covered so far in my top 100, I think that this one is the longest standing, the oldest game in my collection, and that is going to be Five Tribes. Five Tribes, the Djinns of Nagal over here, from Bruno Cathala, from Days of Wonder. This is not a game I'm going to turn upside down because I think the insert's not great for that right now, the way it's structured. Yeah, I don't trust. You know what? Let's risk it. Let's risk it for the biscuit. Let's see how this goes. Five Tribes over here. Oh my gosh. This is a Mancala style game with powers and abilities, and I've loved this game from the very first time I played it. From the very first time I've played Five Tribes, it has been, well, when I first played it, back in the day, it was in my top 10 games of all time back then. That's a long time ago. Since then, it's moved down over here. Now it's 72, but honestly, over the amount of years I've had this, that's still holding up pretty decently. But in this game, you basically have a Mancala style board where you're placing meeples down onto all these areas. But then you pick up a bunch of meeples, move them around, drop them, and activate the spot where you dropped off your last meeples. And when you activate the spot, you're going to take actions based on the color of the meeple and based on the tile itself. So you're taking two different actions depending on two different factors. So there's a lot to juggle there. And those actions range from assassinating other meeples, to gathering currencies, to going ahead and getting coins, to buying things from the marketplace. The tiles will go ahead and put, palm trees and castles down the tiles. Or they'll give you various genies that give you powers and abilities that will augment your tableau. Five Tribes is a delightful experience that is consistently good every time I play it. And I still haven't played one of the expansions. I have all the expansions in here. This is one of those games that's just lasted for me. I don't play it that often. Maybe it hits the table once a year, if that much. It's not one that hits the table all the time, but it does hit the table still. And every time I play it, I'm like, there's a reason I hold on to this game. There's a reason it stays. There's a reason it consistently gives me a good time. That is going to be Five Tribes from Days of Wonder. It's not the easiest game to track down anymore. It's a hard to get game. This is one of those games, like, back when Five Tribes came out, like, was it 2012? Was it that old? No, it couldn't have been that old. Maybe it was. I don't even know how old it is, but Five Tribes is an older game. But when it did come out, that was back in the day when Days of Wonder was still the company that made beautiful looking games. Compared to more and more nowadays, that is more and more the standard. Nowadays, every company is supposed to make beautiful looking games, and Days of Wonder, they also make beautiful looking games, but they're just one of many, as opposed to the company that makes beautiful looking games. Really, genuinely. You go back in the day, you had like Ravensburger and Alia and Days of Wonder, and from those three, one of those stood out on the shelf, and the other two were like, hey, we're dry and beige, and we're probably trading goods in the Mediterranean. Please buy us and enjoy us. They were good games, but they didn't pull you in with their covers or their arts. I still remember Castle of Burgundy. When I first bought Castle of Burgundy way back in the day, I legitimately just refused to play it for like 2 months because I was like, who likes that? Who wants to play that? This is the original. It's like old school Castle of Burgundy. Not the second edition, not the third edition. This is the original Castle of Burgundy. Times have changed. Times have changed extensively in the board game space. My number 71 is another excellent game that I don't play as often as I should, but it is one of the better area control games in my collection, and that is going to be Root from Letter Games. Root over here, a game that I think thrives when you have the expansions, and I have every single expansion for it. This game gives you strong asymmetric play, which granted makes it harder to table, but when you do table, you get a great game, a great experience out of this one. There are a bunch of factions in the game. The base game is going to have 4 factions, and effectively you're trying to take control of the woodland areas. You're trying to move around, and every faction scores points in slightly different ways with some degree of overlap. taking down your opponent's pieces, not their units, but their buildings, that will earn you points. Past that, every faction is slightly different as far as the ways they earn you points, as far as what they do, whether battle, whether combat, whether moving underground, whether, you know, consistently carrying out their orders, their roosts, or whatever it is. There's all these different ways that factions earn points in the game, and there's all these different ways that factions operate. There's some overlap. You move around, you engage in combat. That's the general overlap. But past that, the structures you have, the abilities you have, the extra things that you do, the ways you can spread out tunnels and pop from area to area, the ways you can go ahead and carry out stronger and stronger actions as long as you don't crash and burn. There are always consistent rules changes. We can set up your own little marketplace and sell things to other players to get more influence and power in the game. There's so many small things that you do and operate differently as one of these asymmetric factions. The core game comes with 4, and I believe we're up to 6 so far. I think each expansion has added 2. I could be wrong with the numbers. I think we're up to 6 so far. Plus, they've added hirelings, which are ways to kind of augment the player count or add more things to your game. So you can now have a 2-player game with some kind of semi-AI, but not really AI factions. Just more people in the space that you're playing in. There are a lot of things you can do. There are scenarios. There are maps. There's so much variance to this game. But ultimately, Root gives an incredibly good experience. It is one of the better games in my collection, which is why it's my number 71 game of all time. And with that, we end the 3rd video in the series. We'll be back on Sunday, I guess. We'll be back on Sunday with video number 4, where we cover number 70 through 61. And until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.